The man charged with murdering 4 University of Idaho students late last year is expected in court Monday for an arraignment. This will be the first hearing for Bryan Kohberger since he was indicted by a grand jury earlier in the week. The indictment allows prosecutors to skip a planned week-long preliminary hearing that was initially set for late June. The 4 students were found fatally stabbed at a rental home near the University of Idaho campus back in November. At the time, Kohberger was a graduate student studying criminology at nearby Washington State University. Ahead of Monday's arraignment, I spoke with a legal expert to break down what will happen at that hearing and where the case goes next. Ambrosio Rodriguez is a criminal defense attorney in LA and former prosecutor in Riverside County, California. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and help break this down for us.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, when you hear that Bryan Kohberger has been indicted for these crimes here, initially it appeared there would be a preliminary hearing next month, and a lot of people had been talking about that. They were looking forward to it happening so more information could be released. What are you thinking when you hear he's actually been indicted and now that hearing is not going to happen?
Sure. So there are 2 ways to get to indictment. When a person's first arrested, the legal document charging them is called a complaint. After either a preliminary hearing or a grand jury, the document becomes an indictment, meaning that there's been a probable cause hearing and someone independent of the district attorney's office determines that there's probable cause to go forward. The 2 avenues are preliminary hearing or grand jury. What probably happened is the district attorney decided that there were going to be too many delays going the preliminary hearing route. Just because a date is set doesn't mean it's going to happen. This way, the DA was able to gain control of the case, proceed to grand jury, present the grand jury with evidence. The jury came back with an indictment, and they're able to go to the second phase of the case, which is a jury trial. A lot of times, DAs, the district attorney's office, will do that in high-profile cases in order to avoid delays, which the defense, given the evidence that we know about this case, one of the strategies the defense is going to take is one of delay. So this way, the DA is able to stop that.
So an arraignment, we know that the arraignment will be held Monday. We already had an arraignment in the case prior, of course, to him being indicted back when he was initially arrested. What happens during this arraignment? Is it any different?
No, so there's 2 types. Arraignments happen twice. Once when you're arraigned on the complaint, right? And when you're first arrested. And then there's a second arraignment after you get past preliminary hearing or a grand jury, right? Because a preliminary hearing almost always goes in favor of the district attorneys, but not always. The same thing with the grand jury. So once you get past that phase, you have to have a new arraignment because the name of the document, the charging document, changes from a complaint to an information or an indictment, meaning probable cause has been shown to a judge or a grand jury. So it'll be the same thing. It'll be pleas of not guilty, deny the allegations, and begin the process of getting to a jury trial.
A case like this, obviously very high profile. It's been in the headlines ever since it first happened months and months ago here. Does a case like this ever actually go to trial, or for the most part, is there a plea deal that's reached somewhere along the way, or really does it just depend on the case itself?
High-profile cases rarely plea bargain. They almost always go to trial. The district attorney's office is usually not willing to negotiate on a case like this, and there's really not much to negotiate when there's 4 counts of murder. It's rare that murder cases settle. There has to be some great defense in terms of either mitigation or self-defense for that to settle. But this, like almost all high-profile cases, will go to jury trial.
And as I mentioned, we're talking more than, I would believe, about 7-8 months since the crime first happened. How far away are we at this point from a trial? I know, again, it kind of depends on the case. Some trials happen sooner rather than later. How far are we out from an actual trial taking place here?
Sure. So we shouldn't think of it as the date of the alleged crimes. We should think of it from the date of the arrest and the arraignment on the complaint. That's really when the clock started ticking. The main issue in when a case goes to trial has to do with the jurisdiction itself. right? So I'm in Los Angeles, we're the largest criminal justice system in the United States. Here, things take years and years because of the backlog of cases and the lack of resources. In a place like Idaho, which is a much smaller community, it's much smaller legal community, it might be faster given that, no offense to Idaho, they don't have the number of high-profile cases that we have in Los Angeles, right? And so realistically, we're already in halfway through the year. It will probably be sometime at the beginning of 2024 at the earliest.
And how does social media, obviously we know that this, as I mentioned, has been in the headlines quite a bit. Does that play any sort of factor into how this case plays out? Does anyone on the legal side of things actually pay attention to what people are posting on social media and what they're seeing on the news?
Yes and no. It plays a role when it comes to jury selection, right? In jury selection, both the judge and both the prosecutor and the defense will spend time talking to the jury, asking about their exposure to either news or social media and what they know about this case, because everyone involved is trying to find 12 impartial jurors who won't be influenced by what they read on social media, because that's not evidence, right? A determination of guilt is based on what is admissible evidence, not what you see on, TikTok or Facebook.
And how hard will it be to seat a jury in such a high-profile case like this one? As you mentioned, there's not as many high-profile cases over there in Idaho as maybe in, let's say, LA or really any part of California there. Does it make it more difficult because so many people in that area have probably heard the specifics of this case?
Yes, it does. But the question is not whether a juror has never heard of this case. The question before them is, given what you heard, can you put that aside? Can you forget all about that and base your decision just on the evidence that's presented to you, right? Because it's going to be impossible in a small community with such a high profile and gruesome case for not everyone to know. I mean, everyone was alert. Look, when I was in college, I lived in Gainesville. And I remember there was a serial killer there, and the parents came and everybody went back home, right? Basically, the academic year was put on pause because of that. Again, he went to trial in Gainesville. This is back in 1990, and he was eventually convicted. The question is not, did you not hear about it? The question is, can you put it aside?
And would you be surprised? I know that in some cases, especially when you're talking about high profile ones, they actually get moved to a different county, a different area. Would you be surprised if that were to happen in this case?
Well, I expect that I'm sure the defense will file a motion of change of venue. That, I think, is a foregone conclusion. Whether it's granted or not will depend on many factors. And the fact is that the entire state is probably very well aware of this case, given that we're talking about a small population, and it's not common to have a high-profile case out of Idaho.
All right. Ambrosia Rodriguez, thank you so much for taking the time here to join us. What happens next in this whole process here? As you mentioned, of course, we're going to have the arraignment that happens on Monday. Where does this go from here? What is next?
Sure. Look, I am sure that the defense was taken by surprise. I would imagine that before they found out that there was a grand jury indictment, their plan was they were in the middle going through discovery, working on their defense, and thinking about filing a motion to continue the preliminary hearing that was scheduled. And so now they have to kind of take a step back, think about their strategy, and think about how long it's going to take them to get ready for trial. Because although the DA can kind of speed things up by going to the grand jury, he still has certain constitutional rights. And defense attorneys are given latitude in preparing in a murder case, and especially in a high-profile murder case when we're talking about four victims. So I expect the judge to give them time to prepare, and constitutionally, they have the right to do so.
And one more question here. I know people were, I hate to say looking forward to this, but they wanted to see what happened during the preliminary hearing because there was likely to be a lot of testimony and new details that were released. But now that is not going to happen because that preliminary hearing isn't going to happen here. Is it possible we don't get that information specifically that would have come out until, let's say, the trial happens?
Well, yes and no, because the testimony from the grand jury was transcribed. So and everyone who testified, the grand jury testified under oath. And so if that becomes available to the public, if it's released to the public, then the information will come through that. But we won't have, TV cameras in a preliminary hearing courtroom and allow the general public to view the witnesses for themselves and judge their credibility individually. It'll be rather dry through transcripts.
All right, Ambrosio Rodriguez, thank you again for taking the time here to join us. Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
Look, I expect there to be an aggressive defense, and there might be a mental health component to this, right? Because I think the defense is going to, first of all, attack how they put this case together in terms of the cell phone data is going to be very important to the defense. And I think in any case, when you are accused of multiple murders, there's going to be some type of mental health competency involved. I'm sure that the defense has already retained or have psychiatrists appointed to evaluate him and see where he's at a base level.
All right. Thank you again for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it.